The 21st century has been full of weather extremes for Australia. At the beginning of the new century, a millennium drought hit the Australian continent. Australia was so dry that most areas were on water rations. Towns had to truck in drinking water, and in Sydney and in many parts of Australia, it was literally illegal to do this, to use a sprinkler to water your lawn. The drought lasted for over a decade and resulted in a series of devastating events. Australians, we live with and manage fire. But on a Saturday in early 2009, bushfires raged through Victoria. It was Australia's worst bushfire disaster of all times. A few months later, Sydney went red. In fact, most of the east coast of Australia went literally red. The country was so parched and dry that our red topsoil blew in strong westerly winds from central Australia and dumped onto the east coast. An enormous plume of dust, 6 million tonnes, ended up in the Tasman Sea. Then the next year, in late 2010, the weather changed. Queensland was hit by a heavy cyclone, Brisbane flooded, heavy rains hit our continent. Our desert landscape turned green. In fact, there was so much rain in the outback that they moved the filming of Mad Max Fury Road across to the Namibian desert. The Australian desert was green and covered in wildflowers, not the right look. The wet event in 2011 was extreme. It was felt across the southern hemisphere, not only Australia, but South America and southern Africa. Because there was so much rain that year, the global sea level dropped by 5 millimetres. This series of extreme weather events didn't occur by chance. So what did happen? Well, complex interactions between the atmosphere and our oceans drive our planet's climate. We had the synchronisation of 3 ocean climate patterns, the big players in global climate in our region: the El Niño Southern Oscillation, the Indian Ocean Dipole, and the Southern Annular Mode. Each of these climatic cycles has a major influence, but typically around different parts of Australia. But during the decade of the Millennium Drought, the Pacific Ocean's ENSO cycle was in a strong El Niño phase, and a positive Indian Ocean Dipole and a positive Southern Annular Mode. All of these patterns drive humidity and rain away from the Australian continent, but in different oceans, and it all happened at the same time. This caused our entire landmass to dry out. The massive wave of wet weather ending the drought in 2011, that was caused when the ENSO cycle switched into La Niña, and a negative Indian Ocean Dipole, and a negative Southern Annular Mode. These opposite wet cycles all occurred at the same time. Events like these, where climate systems that bring extreme dry or extreme wet weather coincide in all 3 oceans, is extremely rare. But these extreme events are not new. They've happened before. In fact, my mum, who grew up in what people would call the outback, she didn't see rain until she was 5. However, climate forecasting models predict that these events are going to occur more often. So we need to be better prepared.